You would think that would be enough.
Right? That's a pretty big miracle. And yet,
9 more.
9 more to come. And almost after every single one of these times, this is going to become a familiar theme. God like goes, okay, how about now? And it says that Pharaoh's heart was hardened. And we're going to see that again and again. And so God says, okay, here's another plague.
Okay, so the first plague, the Nile turning into blood is kind of bizarre, but honestly, all of them are pretty weird.
They're all weird. Like if you don't know why God is doing this, they just seem random
Yeah,
and bizarre.
yeah, because even plague 2 is frogs, right?
Yeah.
Frogs of all things after the Nile turned to blood is just seems kind of like a letdown, but what would this have meant to them?
Yeah. I mean, you got to think if you're a god and you're going to essentially conquer a nation and you send frogs, like take a moment to step back from this and it's like, ooh, not frogs, like what are we like 7-year-old girls? Like, oh no, not a frog. But there's a very, very intentional thing that's going on here. So the first plague takes Osiris out, who is the god of the afterlife. Well, in Egypt, Hecht is the god of fertility for this current life, and Hecht is part man, part frog, and so you see images of Hecht, and the idea is Hecht brings new life in this world. And so when you're reading the scriptures, there's a reason why it says the Nile will teem with frogs. They'll come up into your palace and into your bedroom and onto your bed. Well, if Hecht is a god of fertility, that makes sense why it's stressing that the frogs are all over the bed. So the other part of this is if the first plague with the Nile turning to blood takes away your drinking water, like all of the lakes and buckets and everything else, all the water has turned to blood where you can't drink. Plague number 2 comes along and it says that the frogs go down into the ovens. And in ancient Egypt, your oven would be dug down into the ground. But in Egypt, frogs are so sacred that the penalty for killing a frog is the death penalty.
Oh, wow.
So you can't cook. So the first plague takes away your afterlife. The second plague takes away any new life here, your fertility. The first plague makes the waters reek from the blood coagulating. The second plague, when all these frogs die, it says that they're heaped into big mounds and the whole land reeks. So you got the water reeking, the land reeking, afterlife, present life, and you have no water to drink, no food to eat. And so in these first 2 plagues, God is decimating the Egyptian gods. And again, when you see frogs everywhere, if you're an Egyptian, you're like, Hecht, Hecht is coming to our defense. And then all the frogs die and they're rotten. And so your God of afterlife and fertility are both defeated.
Yeah, so God's making it very clear who's holding the power here through these plugs.
That's right. And so we're going to kind of race through some of these, but plague number 3, which is going to be lice. The Hebrew word means small bug. So sometimes you'll hear it gnats. What that meant was that when it covers the priest head to toe, they're declared unclean. And in Egypt, you had to be perfectly clean to go and worship their gods. So you know what God has done by covering people with lice or gnats?
No
He's
worship.
no worship. You're not going to go worship these gods. Then plague 4, this one's really wild, is scarab beetles, or sometimes you hear flies. It's larger bugs, which in Egypt, because the scarab is so sacred, it's almost certainly talking about a scarab beetle. But the god Khepri what took the form of a scarab beetle, and what Khepri would do is push the sun across the sky. And in Egyptian mythology, this is a little wild, but they believed that the sun was like a dung ball. Right? And so a dung beetle or a scarab beetle goes into a pile of poo, gets a nice snack, rolls it with its head, pushing it across. And so they believe that Khepri was a god that rolled the sun across the sky like a dung beetle pushing a ball of dung. And so now that god's really important to the Egyptians. He's dead,
Mm.
right? So all of these, the personification, right? The when they come to life, they all die. Then you get to the 5th plague. And when you look at the 5th plague, it's the plague upon the livestock. Well, why is that significant in Egypt? Well, a lot of their major gods take on the form of livestock. You've got gods like Ptah and Hathor and Hesat. And these gods, what happens in the 5th plague? You have livestock just, they're all dropping dead, which means all of those gods in the pantheon are collapsing. Then the next plague, the 6th plague, is going to be boils. And so all of Egypt's gods that look to health, the big gods like Isis, failing because all of Egypt is covered in these painful sores and boils. They're on the bottom of their feet, which means they can't do business. They can't walk around. They can't get comfortable. They are in constant reminder that their gods are failing.
And you would think, again, obviously this would be enough. Now I'm inflicted with boils, there's frogs everywhere, death seems to be surrounding me. But yet again, we see that Pharaoh is hardening his heart time after time.
And as the plagues go, the people turn against Pharaoh, the magicians turn against Pharaoh, his inner counselors turn against Pharaoh, and now you have this one man who wants to go to war with God and refuses to relent, even though he's given opportunity after opportunity. And so now these plagues start getting a little bit more intense.